CryptoWendyO, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a while since we last saw each other. I think it was in Miami. I don't remember though. Could have been something other event. I don't know.
There's so many conferences. I think we ran into each other at Bitcoin Miami.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it might have been the
East
Hero
Central.
event. Just, I don't know. We saw each other. It was it's a pleasure as always.
You do a lot of these conferences. Do you ever have like really weird encounters with fans?
No, everybody's pretty cool. I'm blessed. I'm grateful.
I'm happy to hear that. So curious to have you on. And do you have like a specific type of preparation that you do before jumping onto these interviews, or do you usually
No.
just wing it?
I just wing it. I think that authenticity is extremely important. I think if you prep and plan too much, it makes it not authentic and it makes it not fun. And also, too, I love to go rogue and not prepare anybody for what I'm going to say next. One of the things I realized growing up is we're always studying for tests. And it doesn't matter how hard you study. A lot of times people freeze up when they're put on the spot. And I did better when I didn't study as hard because I was able to formulate the information properly, if that makes any type of sense. But it feels like you get an additional type of pressure that's put on you for prepping too hard for something.
Were you scared to do that when you first started off on YouTube?
I kind of was, but then I realized that it doesn't matter. People want to see, they want to see authentic content and they don't want to read like me, the type of content I choose to consume. It's just more organic. It's more fun. It's more free flowing. I don't like to see anything that's too terribly scripted because it doesn't make it fun.
You actually just had a roast event. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it was super fun. So it was Mona put it on, and it was Web3 as a joke, and they had some top comedians from the Laugh Factory in Hollywood, which is super well known. Comedy Central just absolutely roast me. A very close friend of mine, he helped me write the jokes so that I can roast them, and they went over really well. And it was just a fun event. It's fun to make fun of yourself, and I feel like the world would be a much happier place if we didn't cancel people for ridiculous, silly things, and people just got to make fun of more things.
What was the funniest joke?
I can't say.
Not even a little bit? A G-rated version?
There's no G-rated version. There's nothing G-rated that was said at that event.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, that's I love how organic and just raw you keep things. And you've been doing this for such a long time. Where do you see yourself going here in the next 5, 10 years?
I just want to keep making content. I want to keep helping other people to educate themselves. Part of what I do is we cover a lot of the breaking news. We talk about technical analysis and those types of things. And the reason why I do what I do is I like to present information to my audience, but I always like to encourage them to hear what I say, but listen to themselves. And it basically means, okay, Wendy's giving me this piece of information. These are her sources, but I want to go ahead and fact check her. I want to continue to do due diligence or continue to practice self-education, because at the end of the day, I can tell you X, but that can change 6 months down the road. And I might not be interested in what I'm talking about today in relation to X. So if that's something that you're interested in, continue to keep self-educating. And again, like, I think that people are more powerful than they think they are, and they're more intelligent than they think they are. And I just want to be that starting place from where people from all different walks of life and backgrounds can get some, like, a foot start and say, hey, this is really cool, and then continue to educate themselves more.
Education is so critical, but I feel like it's such a challenge for us. And I think this is a big reason why, as a whole, in Web3, we're getting away from decentralization and we're creating centralized products because it's very user friendly, right? How do we educate more people to interact with decentralized applications?
Well, that's a hard question or a hard task, because you're really talking about marketing to people who are just so used to everything being done for them in regards to their governments and their banking, their finances, their education. In America, we really don't have to go too terribly far to do anything for ourselves, even though we have all of this awesome information at the tips of our fingertips. So I think that that's really hard, is getting people to understand why they should think for themselves. Because again, we're not rewarded in America for thinking for ourselves. Entrepreneurship is hard. So it becomes a challenge, and it's just kind of educating people on critical thinking and educating them about the banking system and about current systems and how these things work and why they're necessarily not good. And then hopefully, giving them enough confidence and to kind of push them out into the world where they can continue to self-educate and use critical thinking.
Now, how do you balance this line between, hey, I just want to be spoon-fed this information and having that information being
I yell at them.
educational?
I literally yell at my audience. I yell at them and I tell them to do better because, again, like we've all been given participation trophies. We've all had all this stuff spoon fed to us for so long. And I tell my audience, like, if you don't want to hear this, if you're somebody who wants me to spoon feed you trades or project gems or whatever it is, just unsubscribe. Just don't follow me. Don't listen to me. Don't come back because we don't have the same ethos. And
But
again,
that's what people want, right?
what
That's what
to
gets the likes. That's what gets the subscribers a lot of times.
what the spoon fed garbage?
Yeah.
It does, and that's why my channel is not as ranked as high as some of the other people's, and that's okay. I can't operate that way because if I'm spoon feeding you something, and it doesn't even matter, like I could say something bad about a project and somebody be like, you showed this and I lost money. I'm like, dude, I told you it was bad. So it doesn't matter what I say anyways. Like people are gonna do what they want to do. So I would rather build my audience and build my channels and my socials being who I am and forcing people to critical think and encouraging them to do so.
What do you think is the current state of content creators in crypto? Like, how does the world view them right now, you think?
Well, it kind of depends. Like you've got different tiers of content creators on all the different social media platforms. So it really kind of depends. TikTok is probably the cringiest, and then it's Instagram. Then it's a mix of between Twitter and YouTube because they're very different platforms, but there's people that are kind of there together. So it really kind of depends. And personally, I don't care how other people view crypto content creators is because I don't like to I'm more of a shock jock and I do different content than a lot of the other folks are. Yes, I report about the news. Yes, I do talk about a lot of the same topics, but my delivery is a little bit different.
You're also working with CoinDesk, is that correct? Because I feel like I've seen you a few times do some interviews with
Yeah.
them.
So I'm no longer with CoinDesk. They cut like 45% of their staff. So pretty much like most of the people I know that are there, everybody got cut. And it was just what I did with CoinDesk is we did a podcast called The Hash, and I was there 3 times a week, and we just kind of talked about current events, but it was much more tailored. So I had to kind of be careful what I said, but on my show, it's a little bit different. I can be myself.
And speaking of being yourself, a lot of the tweets that you put out there, like you don't hold back. I mean, I
No,
saw you posted a tweet yesterday. You were doing a deadlift squat, which looked pretty good, by the way. You're
thanks.
lifting some weight there.
I think
But
it
one
was
of the things that you
135.
mentioned, you said that I've been pretending to be okay for a very long time. Are you okay?
Probably not. I mean, I've had so much personal trauma since the age of 7, and it's just been really consistent up until now. So it's just kind of something that I deal with. It's so funny. Like I'll talk to friends that I haven't talked to a long time, and they're just not surprised anymore with what's going on in my personal life. So it's kind of like a running joke, and it's like there are things that are not even in my control in any way, shape, or form. So it is what it is. But I'm hoping in the next 2 years I can make enough money just to kind of like be away from a lot of this stuff and ignore, have better capabilities of ignoring what's going on with people that are around me that I necessarily don't have a choice to have included in my life.
So do you feel like having money can get you away from your problems?
Of course it can. Money definitely can help people feel a lot better about their life because let's face it, in crypto, we are, at least on my show, when we talk about crypto, I advise my audience to grift as ethically as possible. That means follow the tax loopholes, pay attention to the laws, figure out how to have the system work in your favor. Because if you have, and also too, if you have access to more money, you have access to better products and services, which can improve your quality of life. Like for this presidential election, I'm voting for whoever's pro crypto. And people are like, why would you do that? You're a woman and your rights and blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? If I have access to more money and I need a service that's not available where I am, I could just go fly to where I need to go and get what I need done. And I firmly like growing up as poor as I did and seeing a lot of things that I've seen. If you do have access to more money and you're smart enough to be able to manage it, you're definitely going to have a better quality of life. And that's just the way society works.
I feel like there's a little bit of a balance there. Like there was a Netflix special about blue zones, and you look at some of these areas where people live a very long time and they're happy. I don't know if it's just a marketing scheme, but they seem to be really truly happy, and they have like very simple things. they're not driving around in a Lambo,
Well, I'm
or
not
they're
talking
not
about
investing.
I'm not talking about owning a Lambo, not any way, shape, or form. I'm talking about having a house that's paid off. I'm talking about having enough money in the bank to where if I don't want to work again, I don't have to. I'm talking about being able to go to the grocery store and buy healthy food without a lot of the junk in it. I'm having access to go to the gym if I want to, having access to money so that I can put gas in the car and go. Or if I want to take a vacation up the coast, I can just go ahead and do so. I'm talking about that type of money. I'm talking about money to just have a good quality of life. I don't want a Lambo. I don't drive a fancy car, and I probably never would, just because it makes me a target. I just want the basic things, but I want to be able to afford it and not have to worry about it. And a lot of people that come from that, like when I grew up, it was four of us that lived in a one bedroom from when I was 7 till I was 18. And the other room was my grandma and my great aunt. So I never had my own room. I don't have recollection of having an own room. I don't have recollection of having my own space up until really a year ago. So a lot of people, when I say that, they don't understand. They think, oh, you want to be like a gazillionaire. No, I want to be able to have enough money that I can donate to my favorite charity, or I can do this, or I can provide for my daughter and not have to worry that I'm going to be out on the streets again. So it's a completely different mindset. But a lot of people don't understand necessarily what that means, because they had the privilege of having their own bedroom at home, or at least sharing it with one other person, a sibling, or, if they needed something, their mom could go to the store and buy it for them, or they didn't have to, eat like 5-day-old pasta or something like that. Those are the types of things that I'm talking about.
A lot of people don't actually know what you've gone through in your earlier years. Can you summarize a little bit about like your childhood? Like, how was it growing up?
Well, I mean, I lost my dad when I was 11. My parents divorced when I was 7. We went from like having money to having completely nothing, which was hard. I got made fun of at school. I got made fun of when my dad died. I got made fun of for him being Jewish on his side. I wasn't treated very nicely by boys and by men and those types of things. And then, like, even after I kind of got out of all of that, it was real, like, before I got into crypto and I started doing well there, it took me a long time to do well, but I spent a lot of time educating myself. And I was at a job working in healthcare for infectious disease, HIV, AIDS. I was at that position 7 years, and before I worked in the retail sector, but I was commuting 3 to 4 hours per week, about 4 times a week. I just had a brand new baby. And I couldn't afford to leave my job because our family needed healthcare. And in California, the cost of living is so, 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 so high. So it was like an absolute miserable existence. And, things were just, now things are getting to be okay. There's some other things I have to deal with. But there's a lot of things that weren't easy. And of course, I can't share my entire story, because as a woman, if you share particular things, it comes back to you in a bad way, and you get blamed for things, and it's not worth the PR and the marketing I'm going to have to deal with to whatever. Unless I've written a book and I'm grifting off of that paycheck I'm getting, then that's fine.
You mentioned that you're on your dad's side, he was Jewish. Like, what are your thoughts on what's happening between Israel and Hamas?
So there's different types of Jews, a lot of different types, like the American Jews. There's there's different subsets of him. He wasn't an Israeli Jew, and he wasn't he wasn't, a Palestinian Jew, like any of those things. So I don't know why Americans tend to comment on a lot of that stuff. Because it doesn't directly impact us. However, I will say that it's very unfortunate and tragic for the innocents that are involved, the civilians, especially, and also too, especially the women and children that are involved. And again, it's both sides. And even when the whole Ukraine thing was happening, people were like, well, I'm siding with this side, and I'm siding with Ukraine and F Russia. And I'm just thinking to myself, do you think that every single person in Russia is like okay with what their president is doing? Do you think that every single person in a particular area that is stricken with strife and with war and with poverty and oppression, do you think that they're okay with everything that's happening? Like, a lot of people will just look at one particular side and they forget to say, hey, well, there's probably people that just they can't say anything, and out of fear of getting in trouble or getting harmed or their families getting hurt, so they just have to stay quiet. So I think it's important to always consider somebody else's perspective. And a lot of Americans aren't capable of doing that because they just get so excited about the hype, even though it doesn't directly relate to them. They probably don't even know anyone who's Israeli or from Palestine. So it's always kind of weird to me, but I think it's safe to say that you should always consider somebody else's perspective and understand that there's sometimes people aren't able to speak out or fight out against their oppressors, and they're just kind of stuck in that environment. And again, Were you allowed to choose the life that you have before you were born? No. You don't get to pick if you were born in a place that just not nice. So I think people should kind of consider that a bit.
Tying that to crypto, there's a lot of money laundering happening all over the world, not just crypto, but crypto seems to take a bad spotlight when it comes to what's happening in the war and Hamas taking donations in Bitcoin. How does this look for the overall industry?
Well, because Bitcoin is public, and because it's open source, and because everything can be tracked on the blockchain, which is the whole intended purpose of Bitcoin, of course we're going to get people that say, hey, you're doing something bad. But did people really care, or were people able to see what JP Morgan and Chase and all these other banks are doing when they're facilitating trafficking, or they're facilitating other horrific crimes? No, we don't know how money is being transferred and used with traditional finance with the banks, because it's all private. We also don't know how much money is being taken from public servants' pockets to invest in things that they're going to be passing bills on, and how that's incentivizing them, or how they're getting financial gain from that. So yes, Bitcoin and crypto is under the spotlight right now because that's what mainstream media wants it to. That's a message that they want to portray. But a lot of people, especially Americans, refuse to really kind of step outside and use critical thinking and kind of see what's going on. Like how much money have banks, how much money have been funneled through banks to do horrific things as opposed to crypto?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a much larger
And
industry.
I'm going to give you a statistic. I'm going to give you well, I don't even know if it's a statistic. It's a number. So Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders want to push crypto regulation for the IRS. Okay. And they're saying if they don't pass this, if they don't hurry up and push this through, it can cost, the IRS can take a loss of taxpayer dollars, I believe approximately $50 billion over 2 years. $50 billion over 2 years. Currently, in the United States of America, we're adding $1.2 billion of debt every hour. We're talking about a number, $50 billion. It would take America like 50, they're saying they're missing out on $50 billion of tax revenue from bad crypto actors, but the US government is adding 1.2 billion per hour to the debt. So, I mean, with that being said, who's the bad guy here?
What the banks are doing is very interesting, right? You have Operation Choke Point happening in the UK with Chase Bank, but then at the same time, the JP Morgan network, I forgot the name of it, but they just
Onyx,
came out
I
with
think it was. Was it on? I think it's Onyx or I just did a video on it.
They're tokenizing funds.
Yeah. But it's private, but it's on a private blockchain. So when you're talking about a private blockchain, that's private. It's not public. So Bitcoin's blockchain and Ethereum's blockchain and all of these other public blockchains that we generally see in crypto, except for some of the privacy stuff like Monero, you can see everything that's happening. But again, the banks are taking blockchain technology and they're teaching it, which they can. That's their business, freedom of speech and decentralization. Da, 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 da. But what they're doing is they're taking that and they're tainting it, and they're just revamping the entire financial system to their favor to make it more cost effective, but also still not transparent. So all they're really doing is just manipulating the system. It's not a positive change. Of course they're going to succeed. Why wouldn't they succeed?
Well, that would defeat the whole purpose why we're in here, right?
Well, we're here because we're saying, F this, we don't want to use this technology. We don't want to be a part of it. Like me personally, I like to use Bitcoin as like a silent protest. I like to use it to remove third parties. I like to use it to gain wealth. I like to use it to help myself educate my audience on the predatory practices of the banking system and the Fed and the history of money and those types of things. So people can really take a step back and say, wow, I didn't know that. Because we're not taught this stuff in school. If you went to a good private school, maybe they'll, drop a little tidbit here and there. Maybe if you grew up with a parent who worked in traditional finance or somebody who used critical thinking, maybe you'll get some education there. But otherwise, for the most part, we just don't talk about it in America. It's very taboo, and it's not something that's very sexy people want to hear.
Well, let's talk about the positives of crypto. What are some of the technical advances that you're seeing that you're really excited about heading into the next bull run?
I personally like, I mean, I love Bitcoin. It's always been one of my favorites. I feel like it is a pretty good hedge to have. I do like a lot of the layer ones that we're seeing popping up to essentially compete with Ethereum, because I think Ethereum is very dirty and I feel like they've got a lot of ties here and there. However, I hold a lot of Ethereum and I'll grift just along with everybody else and make as much money as possible. But I do like a lot of the SoFi networks that are popping up, and I know a lot of them are copy pastas and they might be a little bit dangerous. So make sure y'all research those before jumping into it. But I do think that SoFi is going to be good for the future, as well as the GameFi. And and I've talked to my audience about that a lot. I love NFTs, but we have a lot of work that does need to be done in regards to NFTs. And those are really the kind of things we're paying attention to and focusing on.
I talk to a lot of VCs in this space, just working in the industry, and a lot of them are focused on infrastructure. So they're still looking at different chains. Are there any chains outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum that really catch your attention? And of course, this is not investment advice.
Not really right now, and the reason being is I want to see how these chains perform during the bear and during the bull and during the next bear. Because let's face it, there's so much VC money that's being pushed into things because it's going to benefit them financially, and that's fine. I get it; it's the name of the game. But just because there's a bunch of really fancy VCs with a lot of money that's backing something doesn't mean that it's good. I would need to know a lot more information, and I would want to see why chain X is better than chain Y as opposed to the existing structures that we have. So again, I'm looking for things that do have a little bit more of a decentralized aspect to it. I'm looking on things that you can build upon. I'm looking at things that make crypto a lot easier, because right now the current system is still not pretty easy. It's still just kind of a little bit complex still for the average person to join or even to want to join.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Wendy, Bitcoin will be at what price at the end of the year?
Oh, at the end of the year, I don't know. We have so much going on. We have so much conflict, plus the FTX trial. We're either going to be trading at about 30,000 or about about $20,000. Those are, and I don't like to give. I always like to give a bullish and bearish outcome. But right now, it's like we can record this, and by the time it drops, there can be something crazy that comes out. So I would say between $20,000 and $30,000.
Crypto is like a soap opera, right? I mean, you never know what's going to happen. Every day you're just waking up to endless possibilities. So yeah, I'm not going to hold you to it, but I was just curious to get your thoughts on that.
What do you think it's going to be?
I think we're just going to hover here for the rest of the year. You put me on the spot. I love it.
You put me on the spot. What did you expect?
Yeah. All right. No, I like this. So my perspective, and I'm not coming from a technical analysis standpoint. That's your wheelhouse. For me personally, I talk to a lot of developers. And so just seeing some of the things that are being built, there are still teams out there that are downsizing. So that tells me that they're still thinking that we're not ready to trend upwards yet. So I think we'll be here until the end of the year, maybe even beginning of next year. Once we start getting closer to the halving, I think that we'll start seeing steady movement up, and then 2025, we'll see all-time highs. But hopefully, I think that seems to be like the narrative in the entire industry, right? I mean, everyone says that 2025 is the year, but you never know. We never had Bitcoin existing during a recession. So this Correct. Is a first time for everything.
I appreciate that you say that we're in a recession, because I hear so many a-holes just say we're not in a recession, everything is fine. And I'm like, really?
I mean, we can be optimistic, right? But let's call it what it is.
It is a recession. So I respect you a lot for that, because let's face it, I don't know any other time in history, in American history, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're paying like 40% of our salaries to cover the average. I think it's like 42% to cover a mortgage or to cover rent or whatever that is.
It's crazy. I mean, and we're complaining here in the States, but I was talking to somebody from Argentina. Like, their inflation rate is absurd.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's other parts of the world that are definitely taking a harder hit. But this is why, Bitcoin is the way.
Hopefully. We'll see. Still in beta.
Yeah. Wendy, any parting thoughts for the audience?
Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to give this podcast a like, comment, subscribe, set alerts. And if you guys want to learn more about me or what I'm doing, you can find all of my socials over at CryptoWendyO.com. I've got a lot of impersonators, and it's not me DMing you. I think you're all wonderful, intelligent, amazing people, but I've got a 7-year-old daughter who's wild, and she keeps me on my toes, so I don't have time to DM people.
I'll be sure to include those links in the description.
Thank you.
Wendy, hope you and your daughter have a good, wonderful rest of your day. And thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much.